Welcome to this Nexa video, where we will show you how to use the building blocks of the Nexa workflow functionality. This video is aimed at users with administrator privileges who define the workflows for your company. What is a workflow? When your company is facing a complex task, such as an engineering change order, or a new product introduction, or the publication of some new material, etc., it is useful to break down the main job into smaller activities. We call the scheme of activities leading to the completion of the task a workflow or a process. Adhering to the specific workflow schemes allows companies to achieve regulatory compliance for the most important certification authorities like the FDA and ISO. When designing the activities of a workflow, you will need to decide important information such as who should perform the activity, under which circumstances, does anybody need to be informed that the action is going to take place or that it has been completed? What is the result of the action? Can more actions take place at the same time? How long do we expect the activity to require? And so on. The Nexa workflow functionality is a powerful visual tool for process management, which will help you design and control your workflows. Here you can see an example of an ECO written with the Nexa workflow functionality. As you can see, the activities are represented by icons and they are interconnected by arrows. The icons are the interfaces to customize the activities, while the arrows show the next activity to be performed. We will begin this tour of the Nexa workflow functionality by exploring the icons. At first, the special square icon associated to the process start, then the normal icons that represent all the other activities. Once we know how to define the main parameters of an activity, we will see how to combine many activities together to complete a task. We will do this by providing simple examples composed of few activities regarding the main strategies that one can adopt when building a workflow. After mastering the building blocks, we will show you a more complex example where all the building blocks are used, and you will be able to create any processes your company might need. Once a workflow has been built, you will have the possibility to create instances, that is, specific cases that follow the general picture of the workflow but that are guided by the parameters related to a particular user case. This is similar to classes and class instances of the object-oriented programming paradigm. In this video we will make clear whether we are talking of one or the other. When we are building a workflow, we do not refer to the instance but to the general case, which we also call process definition. The end users instead interact with workflow instances. Only those users with right permissions can see the Administration tab in Nexa. When I click on the Workflow Processes entry, I see all the existing processes and related information, like for example the existing instances of the workflow. There are two kinds of activities, the process start activity and the regular activities. Here we see a workflow where there is a square icon that represents the process start activity. With a single click, I can select the icon or move it around by keeping the button pressed. By double-clicking it, we are redirected to its configuration window. We can see that there are four tabs: General, Branch Rules, Operations, and Permissions. In the General tab, there are the main parameters that define the workflow, like its name. Please remember that each workflow needs a name, otherwise Nexa will not let you save it. Although the description is optional, it is highly recommended to write the notes that allow you to remember at a glance the purpose of the workflow. A single person can become the coordinator of the workflow. A coordinator is a user who has special privileges on this specific workflow. He or she does not need to be an Nexa administrator. A workflow coordinator is responsible for dealing with activities related to specific instances, for example when they are placed on hold, or for cancelling or deleting workflow processes and reassigning activities. The role of an administrator instead is to deal with the process definition and does not need to deal with its instances. We cannot change the modified by entry since it is automatically filled in by Nexa with the name of the current user who is actually modifying the workflow. The last parameter of this tab is the class associated to the workflow. We remind you that all the objects in Nexa are modeled as instances of classes. By associating a workflow to a specific class, we define its properties. An assignee will be able to make changes on the fly regarding the process flow by changing these properties through the proper forms. We will discuss this subject in more detail later. When the workflow has no class, we can use it to route a specific object stored in Nexa. This object, like for example a part from a CAD tool, will define the properties of the workflow. The second tab regards the branch rules. We will discuss in more detail this subject when we explain the regular activity icons. The Operations tab for the process start activity allows us to instruct Nexa on how to launch specific applications. The pre-operations are applications that are run on the Nexa server at the time of a workflow instance creation. The post-operations are instead activated at the workflow instance completion. In these areas, you will need to specify the path of the program to be launched and its parameters. Please remember that the program you want to run must be present on the Nexa server, thus the path you are entering is related to the server and not to your local machine. It is important to test the program on the Nexa server before adding it to the workflow, to be sure that all its prerequisites are in place and nothing prevents it from running. It is easier to debug a program directly rather than when it is called by another one. The last tab regards the permissions. We can select Global, Group, and Personal. When selecting Global, every person within the company will have the permissions to launch the present workflow. By selecting Group or Personal, we are prompted dialogues containing all the possible choices of groups and single users. Once we have entered the values that we need, we can click on OK. Please remember that these preferences have not yet been saved. In order to do so, you need to press on the Save button in the upper bar. Activity icon. Let's concentrate now on the normal activities. Their icon already gives us a lot of information. At the top, we see the activity name. In the white part on the right, we can see a sketch of a person with a small number. It indicates the number of assignees to the activity. The name of the first assignee appears in the dark blue part at the bottom. If the activity has more than one assignee, you can also see the beginning of the name of the second one, while to see the complete list of all the assignees, we need to open the activity and inspect it, either by double-clicking on it or with a right-click and edit. No icon is shown for those activities that have not yet started. If the activity has already started but has not yet been completed, at the left-hand side of the white part there is a small hourglass icon. In the light blue area on the left, we can see the date when the activity has been assigned. If it has been completed instead, there is a green tick mark. The completion date will appear on the right-hand side. Let's now inspect the details of a regular activity. We double-click on the activity. In this case, we see that there are 5 tabs: General, Assignments, Dependencies, Post-Operations, and Branch Rules. General. When you build a new activity, Nexa kindly provides you with a standard name, activity followed by an increasing integer. It is good practice to change it with a name that clarifies the aim of the activity. The description area gives us space for a more extended clarification. It is also possible to enter the estimated duration of the activity expressed in days. Please remember that you cannot save your preferences yet, since each activity requires at least one assignee. We can set it by using the second tab, Assignments. Once we click on it, we can see that we have 4 main options: User roles, users, group roles, and groups. When we click on one of these 4 options, Nexa shows us the list of people, groups, or role names. If we click on one of them and then press on the right arrow, we assign the person, group, or role to the activity. Users and groups are rather straightforward concepts, describing single individuals or groups of individuals within your company. Roles are just labels that get specific values when the activity begins. We need these labels on top of the normal users and groups, because sometimes we want to assign an activity based on the actions performed during the workflow and not based on the company role. A very clear example regards the system-defined role of preparer. This role is automatically filled by the preparer of the project or file attached to the process. no matter who this person is or which group he/she belongs to. Nexa proposes two system-defined roles: preparer, last user. However, the administrators can decide to build new custom roles according to their needs. As you can see, multiple assignments to a single activity are perfectly valid. When more than one person, role, or group is assigned to the activity, we need to set up a system to determine the condition under which the activity can be considered complete. Nexa makes it very easy with its voting system. Each assignee has a vote with a given weight. The administrator sets a threshold value, and when the assignees click on Send Forward, their weight is added to the total sum. When the total vote exceeds the threshold, the activity is complete and Nexa moves to the next activity in the workflow. One should remember that upon passing the threshold, the activity is removed from the work list of all the assignees, even those who have not yet sent it forward. Please notice that you can always remove an assignee by selecting it and pressing on this button. Once all the activities have at least one assignee, it is possible to save the workflow. Let's move to the next step. Dependencies. This tab gives us information on the other activities directly related to the present one. The predecessors are those activities that point to the present one. The successors are those activities that can follow the present one. If there is more than one predecessor, we need to select one of these two options: Merge One or Merge All. A Merge All implies that before starting the current activity, all the predecessors must have been completed. A Merge One is a more relaxed condition, implying that it is enough that one of the predecessors has been completed to begin the present activity. This does not imply that only one of the predecessors must be performed. It simply means that the completion of a single predecessor unlocks the present activity. The Post Operations tab contains two blocks: Trigger on Send Forward and Trigger on Send Backward. As the term suggests, once the activity is sent forward or backward, this will trigger an action. Specifically, the workflow designer should enter the path of a script or app present on the Nexa server. If the activity is sent forward or backward, Nexa activates the corresponding script. You can also add arguments that are going to be passed to the script in order to customize the result. As long as the script can be executed on the server and it has been tested, there is a complete freedom in terms of programming language. For example, you cannot run Python scripts unless Python is installed on the server. You can also duplicate the script in order to submit different post operations. Branch rules. The last tab is reserved to the branch rules. One important information you need to know is that an activity can give rise to more than one successor. It is up to the designer to decide whether all the successors should follow or just one or a few of them. This tab is exactly dedicated to the rules that specify which ones of the successors are going to be executed after the present activity. These conditions can be based on the properties of the workflow. As we said before, one can associate a workflow to a class. Since each class is associated to a form with specific properties, the assignee will have the possibility to modify on the fly the behavior of the activity by changing the values of the properties of the form, provided he or she has the rights to do it. Please refer to the workflow guide regarding the special properties already present in Nexa that can be used for defining custom branch rules. Designing a workflow. Now that we know how to customize the start activity and the regular activities of the workflow, how do we build a new process definition? It is easy as clicking on Administration, Workflows, and then pressing the Add button. This opens a window for the workflow creation with an intuitive graphical interface. My first workflow. We can see three objects: the start activity with a square empty icon, the regular activity icon called Activity 1, and the arrow connecting the two activities. We open the start activity and we enter the workflow name, My First Workflow. We select the CMS Projects Engineering Projects class. Notice that this is a custom class we built. Please refer to the video dedicated to Nexa classes and forms for more insights. No branch rules are available, simply because at the present stage of the workflow, there is only one successor of the start activity. We go to the last tab, Permissions, and we select Global, so that all the employees are going to be able to use the present workflow. We click on OK. At this point, we need to customize the first activity. We change the name from Activity 1 to Send Forward, and we fill out the instructions. We assign the activity to the MCAD group. We check the claimable flag, and we press OK and Save. At this point, when an instance of this workflow is built, every member of the MCAD group can claim the activity. Nexa asks us if we want to activate the process. When a process is inactive, you cannot issue its instances, so we activate it. We can now create an instance of this workflow. We go to the Desktop tab. Please remember that the Desktop tab is just a space for the items you use more often. In this case, we see that it contains 3 objects, 2 parts and a JPEG image. Notice further that when we select the image, it becomes highlighted in blue. Now we press on New Workflow. There are 2 options: create by routing selected items or create by using a form. Each option shows a number of possible workflows. Since the one we built has already an associated class and thus a form, we select the second option. Among the workflows, we see My First Workflow and we press on Create. The form associated to the class CMS Projects Engineering Projects opens and we need to fill its mandatory fields, the blue ones. We could also customize the other fields, the links and the permissions, but we keep the default values and we press on the Save button at the top right. Congratulations! We have just created a process instance. We can see that it has appeared in the desktop area. Up to now, we have been working on the workflow creation from an administrator point of view. It is now time to see the workflow instance from the perspective of the end user. We log in as Paul Moll, a member of the MCAD group, and we go to the Work tab. If we select the work list, we see that it is empty. The reason is that the activity has been assigned to the whole group, and it is up to its members to decide who is going to perform it. In fact, when we go to the Claimable Work tab, we can see the process instance we just created. We right-click on it and select Claim. This means that Paul Moll is now in charge of this specific activity. No other member of its group is going to see the activity. When we select the work list again, we see that the instance is now present. This activity is very simple. All the assignees has to do is to decide whether the activity has been completed and can be sent forward, or it should be pushed back. We select Send Forward and this completes this process instance. The only activity present has been completed and no other action is required. Please remember that you can create as many workflow instances as you need. Now that we know how to build a simple workflow, its instances, and how to use them, we will see in detail the building blocks that allow one to create all the possible kinds of workflows. Parallel activities. We are going to create a workflow where there are 3 activities occurring in parallel. We go to Administration, Workflows, and we press the Add button. This opens the Visual Workflow Builder. At the top, there is a bar with 10 buttons. The first one creates a new activity for the workflow. The second button checks the workflow, looking for missing mandatory parameters, loops, etc. The third one opens the properties of the currently selected activity. If no activity is selected, it opens the properties of the process start. The fourth button opens the Assignment tab of the property window of the selected activity. In this way, we can quickly assign a resource to the activity. The fifth button is a shortcut to build a collection of activities linked one after another. The sixth button is similar to the fifth but creates a set of parallel activities. The seventh button fits the canvas where there is the workflow to show all the activities. The eighth and ninth button provide zoom in and out capabilities. The 10th button opens a secondary window with some useful buttons, including zoom fit, toggle grid on and off, full screen mode, etc. As usual, there is the process start connected to a normal activity. We add 3 more activities and we build the connections between them and the first activity. With this visual tool, it is clear that the first activity is followed by activities 2, 3, and 4. Now we build a final activity and we connect the 3 parallel activities to it. We cannot save the process yet since a few mandatory ingredients are missing. For example, if we click on Validate Process, we know that we have not yet entered the name of the process, and this prevents us from being able to save. Notice that the arrows that connect the activity 1 with activity 2, 3 and 4 are black. A black arrow indicates that all the activities need to be performed. We will see in a minute that blue arrows have a different meaning. Let's focus for a moment on the activity 5, where the process ends. As we can see from the visual interface, there are 3 activities that are working concurrently and lead to the activity 5. We thus need to specify under which conditions the activity 5 should begin. In order to decide that, we double-click on the activity and we go to the Dependencies tab. At the top right of the window there are 2 choices: Merge All, Merge One. By default, the system selects Merge All. This implies that activity 5 can begin only after the completion of all its predecessors. At variance, Merge One means that it is enough to complete one of the activities that lead to activity 5 to activate it. We select Merge One. Now we quickly proceed to fill all the mandatory fields of the workflow that include the name of the process and the assignees of all the activities. We then save and activate the process. We did not assign any class to the process, so its instances will follow the properties of specific items in Nexa. We say that it is an item-based process. We go to the desktop area in Nexa and we select a SOLIDWORKS part. We click on New Workflow. We select Create by Routing Selected Item and we click on the workflow we have just built. A new process instance has been created. We log in as Adam Laird since he is the assignee of the first activity, and we check his work list. As expected, we see an activity that is linked to the part we chose before. We right-click on it. Let's suppose that Adam has performed the duties linked to the activity, like for example reading and approving a document, and we send it forward. At this point, 3 different users have been notified to perform an activity. They are associated to the activity 2, 3 and 4. We log in as one of them, Ana Molina. Please remember that you can see the actual status of the whole workflow by right-clicking on the activity and selecting Process View. All the 3 parallel activities are ready to be performed since we see the assignment date on the left-hand side of their icons. The user Molina decides to send her activity forward. As soon as she has sent it forward, the activity number 5, assigned to the user Rodriguez, becomes available to her and she can complete it. This is because we chose a Merge One on activity 5. Thus a single completed predecessor is enough to trigger it. As we can see with the help of the process view, the activities number 2 and 3 have not yet been completed. This is exactly how the Merge One dependency for activity 5 works. Here's an important information you should be aware of. A Merge One defines only the starting condition for the activity. All the remaining parallel predecessors still need to be completed for the whole process to be considered finished. As a test, we log in as an administrator and we see that there is no finish date. It will appear as soon as all the other parallel activities will be sent forward. The process viewer confirms this, since we see that the activities 2 and 3 have an assigned date, so they require to be carried out before the whole process can be considered complete. Branch rules. If one wants to create a workflow where only some of the activities need to be performed depending on the decisions of the assignees, it is important to make use of the branch rules. Given one activity with many successors, branch rules allows one to set the conditions that decide which of these successors are going to be activated. The high degree of customizability provided by Nexa allows you to set branch rules that activate just one of the successors, more than one, or even all of them. All the workflows come with a set of properties. This is due to the fact that we can assign a class to a process or route it on an existing item stored in Nexa. In the first case, the properties of the workflow are defined by the class. When the process is routed on an existing item, it becomes associated to the properties of the object itself. Just as a reminder, all the objects in Nexa are associated to a class with specific properties. The branch rules can use these properties to redirect the activity flow into the desired directions. Notice that the branch rules are simple Boolean expressions that can be either true or false. The workflow designer builds the branch rules based on the properties of the workflow. If the values of the properties are such that the branch rule is true, at the time when the assignee sends the activity forward, its successor activity is activated. Otherwise, when the branch rule is false, Nexa does not activate the related activity for the current process. To offer higher flexibility, Nexa provides you with some special variables, such as the ID of the process, that can be used for the branch rules. These special variables can be found in the Branch Rules Syntax chapter of the Product Center Nexa Workflow Guide. We take as a starting point the parallel process that we've just analyzed and duplicated. We change its name into a simple process with branch rules. At this point, we modify the workflow. In particular, we associate it to a specific class, CMS Projects. When one instance of the workflow is created, Nexa builds a specific project object and attaches it to the instance. As a result, the assignees of the activities with the right permissions will have access to the properties of a CMS project item through its form. Among the form properties, there is a property called Description, where one can enter the description of the project. We now use the Description property to define how the workflow unfolds. If the description is going to be exactly 3 and 4, then the activities 3 and 4 are going to be undertaken. Otherwise, if we just enter the character 2 into the description, the system will route us to the activity number 2. In order to do so, we enter the special variable item.description in the branch rules and we set it equal to 3 and 4. This implies that Nexa will check the value of the property description of the current process instance. If the form description evaluates to 3 and 4, then the expression will turn true, allowing this branch to proceed. One might wonder what happens when we enter a string that is neither 3 and 4 nor 2 in the description. This is not a problem because when we define the branch rules, it is mandatory to select a default path that is going to be followed when all the branch rules evaluate to false. As you can see, after setting the branch rules, the arrows that exit from the current activity have turned blue. This means that the successors are going to be active only when the branch rules are true. Please remember that when we were building parallel activities in the previous example, all the arrows were black, meaning that all the successor activities had to be completed. Let's create an instance of this process. We press on New Workflow and we choose the new process we just built. We enter the mandatory blue fields and this creates the new instance. We now switch user. Adam Laird is responsible for the first activity. We select his work list and we see the process instance. Adam decides that the workflow should follow activities 3 and 4, while activity 2 should be skipped. He right-clicks on the process and selects Alter. This opens the form associated to the CMS project class. He selects the description field, now empty, and types 3 and 4. Then he presses the Save button at the top right of the form. Before sending the activity forward, we check the process viewer and we see that only activity 1 has a starting date. All the others have not been unlocked yet. Now he sends the activity forward. Please remember that you need to ensure that the user, in this case Adam Laird, has the right permissions to modify the form, otherwise he or she won't be able to change or even see the conditions leading to the branching. Let's open again the process viewer. We can see that the activities number 3 and 4 have a starting date, while activity number 2 does not. The branching has occurred exactly as expected. We can log in as the assignee of activity 4 and send it forward. At this point, the process viewer shows us that the final activity has been unlocked and can be performed. Please remember that the activity 5 has been unlocked because in its dependencies we set merge 1, so it is enough that one of its predecessors becomes complete for activity 5 to start. However, to complete the whole process, all the active predecessor activities need to be done. Suppose that the assignees of the activities 3 and 5 send their activities forward. The process is now terminated. As we can see, activity 2 has not been part of this instance due to the decision taken on the fly by the user Adam Laird during activity 1. Operations. The operations are apps that perform activity-related work. These apps must be present on the Nexa server to be executed. It is good practice to test them before adding them to the process. The idea is that you might want something to happen when the process instance begins, or when it is completed, or at the end of an activity. Please remember that you have complete freedom regarding the programming language of these apps or their behavior, as long as they can run on the Nexa server. This is because Nexa takes care of launching them under the right conditions. For example, you might want to write specific log files, copy files, send emails, etc. There are 4 triggering conditions for the operations, 2 related to the process start activity and 2 related to the normal activities. The operations of the process start are the so-called pre-operations, triggered at the creation of the process instance, and post-operations, triggered at the completion of the process instance. The other 2 conditions upon which an operation can be started are related to the normal activities. They are both triggered after the activity has been executed, but you can configure different behaviors depending on whether the assignee decides to click on Send Forward or Send Backward. Apart from the triggering contingencies, all these operations work in the same way. An app is present on the Nexa server. There are some arguments that can be passed to the app. Among these arguments, there can be process-related information like the ID of the process, the assignee name, etc. When the condition is met, Nexa passes the specific arguments to the app and launches it. In this example, we will see a very useful operation, sending an email. Nexa comes with an app designed to send emails called wfemail.exe. It is located in the bin/x86/3 subfolder of the Nexa installation folder. We won't go into the detail of the configurations. You can find them in the workflow guide. There it is specified how to configure the email server, how to pass the arguments of the email, etc. You can request related information to nexa-support@saplm.com. The 2 files dedicated to the configuration of wfemail.exe program are wfemail_site and cms_site. You can find them in the resource subfolder of your Nexa installation directory. We have built a very basic workflow composed of the process start and 2 activities called Send an email to the last user. This activity has been assigned to Paul Moll, followed by the activity called The End, assigned to the user Simon Knight. We added the first activity and we go to the Post Operations tab. We can see that both the Trigger on Send Forward box and the Trigger on Send Backward box are empty. We click on the plus button at the right of the Trigger on Send Forward. Here we insert the path to the wfemail.exe app. Please remember that it is located in the Nexa installation folder under bin x86-3. In the right-hand side space, we enter the parameters passed to the email app that contain, among the others, the process ID and the activity ID. Notice that Nexa sends the email to the assignee of the successor activities. At this point, we build an instance of the workflow. Let's test it. All we have to do is to log in as Paul Moll and send the activity forward. Nexa takes care of sending a notification email to the user of the following activity, containing all the information that we specified in the configuration files. Here we can see its content. You have seen all the main building blocks of a workflow. We are now going to see an example of an Express ECO that is going to use all of them, and which shows you the customization power of the Nexa workflow functionality. At the beginning, we will show the requirements of the workflow. Later, we will see how these requirements have been implemented. The product manager is responsible for initiating the ECO. Once he decides to begin the process, both the procurement and the engineers should be notified via email to review a specific assembly. These 2 activities are independent from each other and they should run in parallel. The go-no-go activity should start only when both the reviewers have terminated their job. With the help of the 2 preliminary reports, the product manager should decide whether to continue the ECO or to terminate it. If the decision is negative, the process should be routed to a final activity where the reasons for this stop are explained and recorded. Otherwise, it is up to the project manager to decide the teams in charge of the modifications to be made. There are 3 possible teams: MCAD designers, project engineering, and component engineering. The product manager should just indicate the themes on the fly in the properties of the assembly, while Nexa should be in charge of sending an email to the assignees to be sure that they know what needs to be done. It is mandatory that all the assigned teams should complete their designs before the ECO can be approved. The final approval activity is going to be decided by a panel composed by the production manager, the configuration manager, and the proposal manager. The decision does not need to be unanimous, but as long as two of them agree that the changes should be done, the ECO is going to be approved. Let's see the workflow. This is the first activity where the product manager decides to begin the process. As you can see, there are two successors that should be run in parallel since the arrows are black. As we open the first activity and we enter into the Post Operations tab, we see that the wfemail.exe program has been inserted in the send forward operations. We check the go-no-go activity, where we see that there is a merge all for the predecessors. Both of the initial reviewers must have finished their job. The go-no-go activity can give rise to a continuation or a termination of the process. If the product manager decides that the ECO should continue, he or she can indicate in the description of the assembly the names of the design authorities. As a result, they are going to receive an automatic notification email as shown in the post operations. Or he/she can specify, for example, this piece of information through a drop-down menu in the process form. We notice that the exiting arrows are blue. This means that a subset of the following activities is going to be performed and not all of them. Finally, when the designers have completed their job, the panel composed of 3 authorities is going to review the changes and decide whether to send their activities forward or ask for more work. Now you have a good understanding of the Nexa workflow functionalities. You will be able to build any process needed by your company. The workflow will allow you to automate the flow of information and to keep detailed reports on the activities performed. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications so that you won't miss any next update and all the upcoming Nexa tutorials. Thanks for watching.